Good evening. My name is Beck and I am the Engagement Manager at Greenfleet. I'm going to get Wayne Wescott, our CEO, to join us this evening, and we're going to have another chat about COP26 and everything that happened at the conference. Just getting one start. I would like to acknowledge that Wayne and I are both joining from Wurundjeri country in Melbourne today, and we acknowledge that the Wurundjeri people are the traditional owners of this land and pay respects to their elders, both past and present, and particularly to anyone that may be joining us this evening. I'm just going to try and get Wayne to join again. There we go. So COP26 is the United Nations Climate Change Conference, and it's been happening over the last 2 weeks. It came to an end over the weekend, and a lot happened in the 2 weeks leading to the end of the climate conference. So Wayne is going to fill us in on some of the things that we saw come out of there. There's Wayne.
Sorry about that.
Getting organised. That's
No,
okay.
we have that wonderful moment when you can blame Telstra or the NBN or someone because it suddenly said, oh, this connection's really weak. And I thought, well, hold on, that connection's been pretty strong for a long time, but, you know, such is life.
How are you this evening?
I'm very well. It's turned warm, so the regular weather update from Melbourne, it's warm, and which is lovely, and life is good. So, yes. All well here. Thank you very much, Beck.
Well, the COP26 is now to an end, and it was a very big week. So, can you just give us kind of an overview of where everything ended up and what you think the highlights are?
Yeah, look, it was very interesting, wasn't it? I think, there was I think the headline has to be simply the failure to lock in enough reductions to keep the 1.5 alive. Now, there's been a lot of spin backwards and forwards on this, but I think all of our viewers would know there's been a lot of debate, not from the intention, but to get intentions turned into actions, and that didn't happen. Pretty clearly, that didn't happen. So I think the lack of commitments would be the biggest single outcome that we can't ignore. But as I described last time, I think there's been some good movement forward. I think there's been a lot of bilateral agreements around deforestation in particular, which for all our legitimate scepticism, these are good things that the global community is discussing, debating, trying to journey forward. I mentioned also that there's been increased domestic pressure across the globe. And even though, that's been a bit up and down, it would be fair to say that I think our own Prime Minister has committed to net zero, done a deal largely because of COP26. Without COP26, that wouldn't have happened. Now, let's leave aside the substantive part of that for the moment. I think the US-China connection was a really good one, where we thought, for much of the conference, we thought that climate change was just going to be another power play between US and China. But it would seem that there's been a lessening of geopolitical tensions around Taiwan and an agreement to work together on climate change. This can only be good for our planet. We are small players compared to those two, but I think that's all very positive. I think I mentioned before the role of Indigenous communities is much stronger and more prominent than ever before. And I think this is something that I'll talk about in a minute, that I think Greenfleet's taking very seriously as well. And I think this is a global push to understand the unique place that Indigenous communities are in terms of climate change and more broadly ecosystem restoration. And I think probably, although I think we're all disappointed with the language, now, I've talked before about the theatre of the UN and the language they use. And so there's a lot of intricate, detailed work around the language, because that's what it comes down to, of course. For the UN, it's about text that you agree upon. But I think the debate around coal was pretty interesting. Now, whether anything of substance comes, I don't know. But I think that we're going to see enormous acceleration of investment into renewables. That's already been happening the last decade. but I think we're going to see an enormous uptake. And even just talking to Greenfleet supporters over the last 2 weeks, so many organisations are saying, look, we recognise this is the tail end of something. We need to move to the next phase. And so we'd like to step up our game, which is great, right? So I think they're all causes for positive thinking. And I think finally, a really important reminder that, governments have a very important part to frame the policy and the structures of the way we live, but that we ourselves control much of that. So for me, it's a reminder of how much we need to take personal action. We need to focus on what we can do to avoid, to reuse, to reduce, and to offset in our lives. Now, all of us can't buy an EV, or sadly, we can't all put solar panels on our rooftops, and maybe many of us can't afford to do a lot of other things in our lives. But we can try as best we can in those 4 categories to take action. And I think watching COP26 and the very difficult machinations between countries, I think we should also realise that each of us have an obligation and duty as well. Doesn't let them off the hook, I'm not suggesting that, but I just think that it reminds us we have a part to play too.
Yeah, definitely. And where does it leave us here in Australia specifically when we out over the time of the conference?
Yeah, I think it's a very disappointing conference for Australia. Very disappointing. And as an Australian who's attended plenty of COPs, I know that listening to Australians there that we were not popular. We in fact won I can't remember what the final Fossil of the Day award is called now, but we won it, which is not a good thing. It's not a gold medal. It's a gold medal in being stupid, really. So sadly, we won that. And I think what's that really saying is that Australia is a middle power internationally. We don't have the clout of the large countries, obviously. We're a small population. But traditionally, we have been like, say, Canada and New Zealand and the Scandinavian countries. We've been a force for good. We've been progressive on so many great issues, social, environmental, economic issues. Australia has always been a voice for progressive, humane, liberal, democratic values. We totally walked away from that at COP26, and I think as a country it was shameful. And I think it was a very poor performance, and I hope that comes back to bite the federal government, because I think they let us all down in that performance. So having said that, again, it reminds me that we have an election coming up next year. All of us are required to think about climate action, our need for it, and to take appropriate voting, but also to talk to our colleagues, our neighbours, our families, our work colleagues, about the importance of this. So I think, it's a paradox, isn't it, Beck, that sometimes it's the thing that works least well that spurs you on to do more. And I think in some ways COP26 delivered on the basis that Australia has managed it very poorly. I don't care about the politics of it. I mean, I get very upset when public policy of the grave nature of climate change is reduced to simply marketing mantras and how can we make it all work politically. It's not about that. It's about thinking about where we will be at the end of the century and beyond. So it's a much more important piece. And I think, therefore, for Australia, we have to think a lot harder about where we'll be over the coming decades.
I think considering the fact that 1.5 degrees is still, or keeping our global warming to that is still a lot. I think the Greenfleet has been growing hope for so long. The fact that we can take action and we can been taking climate action now for nearly 5 years. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the ways that Greenfleet is growing hope right now?
Yeah. I'm getting a little bit of choppy noise from you. I'm hoping that my noise is okay, my volume is okay here. But I think, firstly, I think that we are reorienting very strongly around the notion that the work we do with carbon offsetting, which, as you know, Beck, was given a fairly strong run out through COP, there are a lot of and I agree with much of the criticism of carbon offsetting when it's done in a thoughtless way or a way that focuses on making money. That's not what Greenfleet does. We're not for profit. Our job is to have climate impact. So firstly, I'd say that we see our carbon work as part of a much bigger sustainability story for our country. As you know, we protect our ecosystems that we're restoring, our forests, for up to 100 years. So by the end of the century, the work we'll have been doing throughout this century will have created thousands of hectares, be sequestering many millions of tonnes, and I feel really proud about that. So that work is now, I think, more sharpened, thinking about the bigger sustainability push. And I think for us, ecosystem restoration is increasingly social restoration. So we work very closely with traditional owners in our big project at Noosa, where I signed an Indigenous land use agreement. And I think in the future, we would be doing a lot more work directly partnering in a new way. I mean, it's not easy work. We come to it humbly and we want to stay humble in this, but we would like to really partner closely with Indigenous organisations to do the work we do restoring ecosystems. We're looking at lots of new approaches, blue carbon and soil carbon being the obvious ones, but there'll be new things through this decade that Greenfleet's looking at. Now, why are these important? Because these are ways to fund sustainability work in terms of blue carbon mangroves, soil carbon, working with regenerative farming. And we've bought a farm down in Gippsland, and we've just put our farmers in there on the weekend, last weekend, a young family, and we're looking forward to demonstrating practically that we can improve the carbon in the soil, and therefore they'll go into drought later, come out quicker, and hopefully we'll be able to improve the ecosystem as well. So, and I think, as I said before, the avoid, reuse, reduce, offset kind of sequence, what we want to do is make it easy for people to take action. What we don't want is for people to say, you know what, it's all too hard. India's been difficult, China's been difficult, US has been difficult. Oh my God, Trump's going to come back. Whatever might be the worry of the day. What we want to say is we can take climate action. We can do it in our own day-to-day work, whatever you can afford, whatever you can do, but you can also help by offsetting. And that we'll take that money, that donation, and turn that into an ecosystem that will be protected for the rest of the century. So you get to leave a legacy as well. And I think that's a beautiful story that we'd love a lot more people feeling a bit empowered to take. And by doing so, as always, we don't want to be sitting around feeling anxious. Yes, there's cause for anxiety, don't get me wrong. There's also a need for action. So let's take that action together. And yes, there will be a COP27, and no doubt we'll be talking through it. Beck, you and I might well be doing that, who knows. But most importantly is that day to day, there's a lot of good work going on the ground that will make a big difference to the way our country and indeed our planet deals with climate change.
Thanks, Wayne. I think there is hope, and we do hope that more join in quest to grow climate hope. So thank you so much for your time. Anything else you'd like to leave our followers with this?
No, I'm as I've said many times, I love talking to supporters. So if any supporters are interested, they know where we are at our website. They can connect to me there. I'm very happy to talk to people. I know that sounds funny, but I am a strong believer that our job is also to not only build hope, but to reinforce that by dealing with some of the issues that come up from people. So I'm always very interested in what people have ideas for, what we should be doing, what we could be doing. And I look forward to talking to any of our supporters whenever that works for them. Great.
Thanks, Wayne.
Okay, thank you very much. See you later.
Bye.